Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Angela Birch-Achatry. I am a Deputy Director with the Hunt Institute on the Early Learning team, and I am joined today by my colleague, Christy Moore, who is supporting us behind the scenes. Also joined today by our guest moderator, Sunil Gandaria, the Chief Innovation Officer at Age of Learning, and our panel of resource experts, who Sunil will introduce shortly. I want to take this opportunity to also thank Age of Learning for their sponsorship of the Hunt Institute. We appreciate their investment in the work of education policy. For the benefit of those who might be joining the Hunt Institute for the first time, the Hunt Institute is the creation of our founder and namesake, four-term North Carolina Governor James Hunt. We serve as an education policy support to governors, state legislators, and other high-level state elected leaders. And we cover the full spectrum from prenatal and early childhood to college and career. So before we jump into the content, just a few housekeeping items. Later in our session today, we will be taking questions from the audience. You're welcome to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You might have to click the three little dots to find that function, but once you find it, it should be available. Please submit your questions through that. Also, we will have closed captioning in our session today, and early next week, we should have the recording of this available on the Hunt Institute's YouTube page. So moving forward to our topic today, this webinar will explore the impact of the Age of Learning pilots through Palm Beach Early Learning Coalition, the impacts on kindergarten readiness, focusing on how the program has enhanced skills as well as the policies in place to support entry to kindergarten. So now I'm going to hand things over to our guest moderator, Sunil, to give us an overview of that information and get things started. Sunil, take it away.
Thank you, Angela, and the incredible team at Hunt for providing a space for having these conversations, these really important conversations in terms of how we use policy to make impact happen. And we're here today because the science is clear. Investing in early childhood education delivers the highest return of any public investment. And this is not just for children and families, but for our economy and our society. Nobel laureate James Heckman's research shows that investing in early learning can produce a 13% ROI over the lifetime of individuals that benefit from high quality solutions. And it's not only in education, but in health, employment, and lower societal costs. But the return doesn't come from just any program. It's important that the program is high quality, evidence-based learning experiences that help children develop really foundational skills from the start. And it's something that Age of Learning we've been focused on in early childhood for over a decade. We started with ABC Mouse, which was really designed to make learning joyful and effective for young learners at home. And it's resonated. It's more than 50 million children have used it. And families consistently tell us that they see growth and that it instills a love of learning in kids. This experience has taught us two important things. That is how young children learn best, and when a program truly works, families embrace it. But we also saw the need to do more, especially to address persistent gaps in kindergarten readiness and third grade proficiency. So what we did is we leveraged our learnings from ABC Mouse and brought it into schools. And I had the good fortune of leading a team of experts across learning sciences, child development, behavioral research, and instructional design and data science to build a research-based platform for classroom use. And we're really proud of our results. We have multiple patents on a system that personalizes instruction, provides educators with real-time data, and connects families to their child's progress. What we built on this platform and launched are two products, My Reading Academy and My Math Academy. And these programs we have evidence in over 24 third-party validated research studies that show they significantly accelerate learning outcomes and drive student engagement. While we were rolling these programs out back in 2021, Florida had just passed House Bill 419, which was championed by Senator Grahl and Representative Alupe. This legislation created a new accountability system and really signaled the state's commitment to raising the bar in early learning. Soon afterwards, we were fortunate to be introduced to Warren Eldridge and Aruna Gilbert at the Early Learning Coalition of Palm Beach. and they were at that time working on strategies on how to prepare their VPK providers to meet these new standards. And what they saw in this legislation was not just a compliance requirement, but an opportunity to innovate. In early 2023, that's really where the journey began with our friends in Palm Beach with their VPK classrooms, and the partnership has already yielded exciting evidence on the kind of transformation that's possible when high quality tools meet strong systems and local leadership. So we're joined today, and I'm really excited about who's on the panel and what they're going to talk about, by three incredible leaders who are architecting the systems and, let's call it, the public data infrastructure that I feel is really needed to move the needle on kindergarten readiness. Each of them brings a unique perspective, and together they really represent how policy and practice can work in tandem to foster innovation and transformational change in outcomes. So I'm going to start with Makayla Buchanan, Director of Early Learning and Literacy for the Florida Chamber of Commerce, where she plays a pivotal role in advancing the Chamber's blueprint, which includes the ambitious goal of 100% kindergarten readiness. She brings a unique lens on how the business community can help strengthen the early learning pipeline and why it's so critical to Florida's future workforce. Next, we have Chancellor Carrie Miller, who leads the Division of Early Learning at Florida Department of Education. Chancellor Miller has led the state's efforts to put in place clear readiness metrics and student growth expectations. Her work is foundational to really aligning the efforts across the state to ensure every child enters schools ready to thrive. And rounding out our panel is Aruna Gilbert, Chief Program and Policy Officer at the Early Learning Coalition of Palm Beach. Aruna brings a powerful on-the-ground perspective as she translates state policies into effective practice in one of Florida's most diverse communities, using data-driven strategies to really make impact on families, educators, and students. Thank you all for being here, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation. So let's jump in. I'm going to turn to Makayla. I'm going to start with you, and I think it's going to surprise a lot of folks and hopefully inspire them as well, that someone from the Chamber of Commerce is not only on a webinar about early literacy and kindergarten readiness, but here to champion the Chamber's decision to make kindergarten readiness a key pillar in their strategic blueprint. So can you talk to us about the relationship between the Chamber and early readiness efforts, and why this work matters to the business community and the future of Florida's workforce?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sunil, and thanks for having me on the panel today, to really offer that business community perspective on why the issue of early learning is so very important to us. So as the intro suggested, I am Makayla Buchanan. I'm the Director of Early Learning and Literacy at the Florida Chamber Foundation, and we are future focused on the data and research. And we're really the engine behind the Florida Chamber in what we call the Florida's 2030 Blueprint. So we are laser focused on growing Florida's economy to become a top 10 global economy. That probably does not shock anybody on the call who knows anything about chambers of commerce, right? We currently sit as number 16 when we think about GDP. As a nonprofit ourselves at the Florida Chamber Foundation, we convene business, education, and philanthropic leaders ongoingly, really to talk and champion and solve systematic challenges, especially those that impact economic mobility and workforce readiness. And we know that early learning and literacy impact both, right? So today, the lay of the land, just 51% of Florida's children enter kindergarten ready to learn, and about 55% of third graders read on or above grade level. A number of years ago, when we did put out that big future focused document called the Blueprint, we had a team of experts that gathered together. We spent millions of dollars, and they said we really need to get both of those to be 100% if we want to be able to achieve a goal that Florida could be a top 10 global economy. So again, context and where we're headed is 100%. Without strong early learning, we lose that chance to build all of that future ready workforce, right? So we have an entire initiative that I have the privilege of leading every single day alongside a rock star group of people that we call the Business Alliance for Early Learning Project. And that entire project is guided by the North Star that we want to really mobilize the business community and really everybody, because it's going to take us all to get there. that around 100% of third grade reading scores. So again, 55% moving to 100%. So we do that in a lot of ways. We talk about early learning and literacy, not just as, a charity cause or, the data, the irrefutable data that about how important the first 5 years of life are and the brain science, but really the business case and the economic imperative of making these investments. If we can fix early learning, we can fix 1,000 other things. And that's a quote that I'm stealing directly from our CEO, Mark Wilson, who says it from a main stage all of the time. So we have a number of public-facing tools that we use to track how we're doing. So we have the Florida scorecard, which shows the state level, right? The 2 metrics I named for you a couple of times, and the county level. So Aruna can go and look at Palm Beach. I'm from Clay County, so I can pull up Clay anytime. And all of the goals that we're tracking, we've got 39 total, not just the 2 that I mentioned to you relevant to this webinar. And you can pull those up at any point in time and see the county. You can also use the Florida Gap Map, which is another public-facing tool that the Florida Chamber created a couple of years ago. And you can actually look at the zip code level and at a school level reading scores. So again, building awareness in the business community, right? Kind of part of step 1. Why is this so important? Where are we at today? And now I almost see it in the momentum and all of the great work that's been laid. I've only been in this job for about 11 months. So I'm sort of standing on the backs of many giants, so to speak, as I enter the field and think about how do we really drive towards that 100%, the action that it's going to take. And so we have everything from a website dedicated to promising practices. How can we intervene in the birth to 5 space? We have a podcast, which we brought Aruna and Sunil on just to share across Florida what they've done in Palm Beach and how incredible that was. And so again, maybe folks can replicate that. Maybe there's a business leader who wants to be involved. In the K-2 space, those volunteers who are trained and targeted, and they're going in and reading with kids every single day, to education foundations and all of the nonprofits that support our school districts, sitting down with them, figuring out what is it that we really can do? What do we want help with? How can the business community step up and support them? So we do a lot of that type of connecting and convening to, again, drive action. And then we put out a lot of research. So we have the data tools for driving action. We put out a lot of research. Last year, we put out some groundbreaking research that, again, to that business and economic case that we're trying to make around how early learning is critical to generation issue, right? Yes, it is going to build kindergarten readiness. We're going to have third grade reading increase if every child has access to quality early learning. But it's also a huge issue for the current workforce, right? From the business community's perspective, we only have about 90 people looking for jobs for every 100 open positions in the state of Florida. So there's a labor shortage. And we know, based on our research that we did last year called Untapped Potential, that the #1 reason that parents in Florida quit their jobs is because of childcare issues. That cost our state $5.4 billion a year in lost economic impact. It's employee turnover, it's absenteeism cost. And since then, since that research, we now have an employer childcare tax credit. And so employers can now, help be a part of the solution in a very specific childcare solution way, in addition to all the things that they can do in the K-2 space around reading specific goals. We more recently put out a third grade reading report, and we've also took a deep dive into one local community to see what are those very specific zip code elements, like where are the children in poverty? Where are low percentages of 3 and 4-year-olds enrolled in school? Where are they underperforming maybe in third grade where we want them to be better? And how do those all overlap? And again, how do we drive? We created a whole roadmap based off of this data. So we just give them their data and walk away and say, we'll hope you figure it out. But really what they were the roadmap, and offered them some scalable, replicable solutions, maybe from next door into another community across the state of Florida and also nationally. So you can kind of think of us as a one-stop shop, sort of almost like a think tank, but like a think and a do, because we're really trying to raise awareness, want to sort of change the messaging and make people understand how this is really important for today and for tomorrow's workforce, and then really showing people a route forward and not just leaving them hanging on all of that. So I hope that helps position what we're doing and why we're part of the conversation. And thanks again for having me here.
I love it. A think and do tank is what everyone needs. So thank you, Makayla, for really sharing powerful insights and more importantly, like connecting the dots on how investing in kindergarten readiness isn't just an education or charitable issue. It's a real economic one with real dollar implications, not only on the prosperity of Florida's citizenry, but the state as a whole. And so with that, I want to turn to Chancellor Miller. Florida has made kindergarten readiness a central priority in recent years with new accountability systems, a statewide assessments, and clear expectations for growth in pre-K. So tell us, how has the state demonstrated its focus on kindergarten readiness, and what kind of impact are you seeing and hoping to see for students and families as children prepare to enter school?
Thank you, Sunil, for the introduction. Again, my name is Carrie Miller, Chancellor of Early Learning at the Department of Education. A little bit of context around our role and what we do, first and foremost, is we at the department are responsible for implementing two major early learning programs. The School Readiness Program, which is our program that provides financial assistance to families so they can get care and education for their children while they join the workforce, right? And they have to be working to participate in our school readiness program. And then we also have our voluntary pre-K education program. It is free of charge for any family that wants to partake in that, ages 4 years old, some 5s, depending on your birth date. But it is a free program offered across the entire state of Florida. It could be offered during the school year, or a summer VPK program are the options that are provided, with the main goal of ensuring kids enter kindergarten ready for school. We have, as Sunil shared, been doing a lot of work really driven by House Bill 419, which Sunil alluded to. It reestablished our VPK provider accountability system. In the past, in Florida, we held VPK providers, those that provide VPK in the state, accountable based on how their children performed at the beginning of kindergarten on a kindergarten readiness assessment. That's past practice. With our new VPK provider accountability system, we use solely data that's collected during our VPK program year. And so that's a big change in past practice to moving forward with, again, our new VPK accountability system, which will be applied for the very first time at the end of this 24-25 program year. It took a good year and a half to develop our new VPK provider accountability system based on the statutory requirements. Again, that really did move us in the right direction and really created a more improved system for holding our providers accountable to ensure the kiddos in which they're serving enter kindergarten ready for school. So before I dive into kind of the crux of that accountability system, I think it's important to share a little bit about messaging around kindergarten readiness. You know, I learned very quickly, my past experience and my entire career was solely focused on literacy policy and initiatives, right? Ensuring kids can read by the end of 3rd grade so they are successful in 4th grade and beyond, my entire career. And so I spent a lot of time in the K-3 space, really working on assessment, curriculum interventions, evidence-based practices to support teachers in mastering their craft, to better support children, to ensure they exit 3rd grade with the grade level reading skills they need to be successful. I've had the opportunity now, in the position in which I'm in, to learn a lot more about the early learning space, and it didn't take but probably 6 weeks for me to realize and actually question my past work and my dedication to K-3 policy for so long, because I missed the boat, right? I learned very quickly that early learning matters. We were starting too late, putting all my eggs in one basket, so to speak, and focusing on kindergarten through 3rd grade. And I would say that to every state that's on this call as well, because I know a number of states that are participating, I noticed a good bit popping in, do have K-3 literacy policies, are implementing strategic initiatives around that, and they are powerful and they are necessary and they are needed. But I will say also, if we're not focusing or putting some attention to our early learning space, we are doing a disservice, right? To not only our educators out in the field that are trying to help these children grow and develop in the way they need to be prepared for kindergarten and beyond, but obviously our kiddos, right? And so our teachers and all the things. So with all that saying, the messaging matters, right? So knowing your players, knowing the governance structure around early learning, coming together with a united message of that importance, and saying the importance of kindergarten in very salient points and saying it over and over again is critically important to raise awareness and advocate for our early learning space. So that was really a lot of the work, and which I've really worked hard. I love that the Florida Chamber is involved with this. It's been a great partnership in respect to the work we do, and a great additional layer Makayla's brought, which is fantastic. But messaging matters. So I can't say that enough, and I know everyone on this call knows that. But coming together in a united fashion, identifying that one message and having salient points of why that matters is critically important, not for all stakeholders, for everyone to understand the importance of early learning space and what we mean by early learning, especially our lawmakers that are informing policy, right, to support our efforts in what we do. So I'm going to jump in a little bit to our VPK provider accountability, which again has been a work in progress over the past year and a half, and we are rearing and ready to go in implementation at the end of 24-25 program year. But it takes three components for our VPK accountability system. One is our program assessment. We in the state of Florida use CLASS as our program assessment to measure the quality of our VPK programs, and not just VPK programs. We use CLASS for our school readiness providers as well. So we start as early as infants with measuring the quality of our programs across the state. So CLASS is one component of our VPK accountability system. It's required to be measured no less than 50%. That is a statutory requirement, so it will be measured 50% of the calculation for our VPK providers. The other two components are based on, I say new, but we're now in our third year of implementation now of our coordinated screening and progress monitoring system. It's a coordinated, and it's from VPK through grade 10, which is pretty, it's an unbelievable opportunity for the state to have one coordinated, seamless system to measure progress of students, and also that data follows that child. So you constantly have data and the progression that's being made on their trajectory within their education career. And so we use, as part of our VPK provider accountability, we use that assessment. We use STAR Early Literacy as that particular assessment. It's administered 3 times a year, but we use it for 2 purposes as part of our VPK provider accountability system. One, to measure learning gains from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, and that is counted for 30% of the calculation. And then we also measure achievement at the end of the year. What percent of your kiddos were K-ready by the end of your VPK program year? So we measure achievement. So again, CLASS, our program assessment, 50%, and then we use learning gains beginning and end of the year for us 30%, and then we look at outcomes, so looking at achievement at the end of the VPK program year, and those 3 components is what the calculation is based on, and providers earn designations based on this calculation. Our designations run from excellent all the way to unsatisfactory, and for any and every accountability system, right, it's for recognizing and identifying those that excel and are high performance and celebrating that, and also identifying those that need an improvement. So we identify those that need an improvement, and we have policy around those types of improvements and supports that will be provided to help them grow and increase and provide quality care and education and prepare kids that enter kindergarten ready for school. So again, it's been a year and a half in the making, maybe even 2 years in the making at this point in time. We're again applying at the end of the 24-25 program year. And we're super excited about the opportunity, again, using the accountability system to help our providers be the best they can be to serve every child in the state of Florida. That is our main goal with our accountability system, to prepare kids to enter kindergarten ready for school. So super excited about that. There's a number of other initiatives we're doing, but I'm going to pause because I want to give Aruna an opportunity. They've been doing great work in Palm Beach area, and I know we'll have plenty of time to talk about some other initiatives. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Chancellor. It's inspiring to hear how you, like many others, are just recent converts to the religion of how it is to invest in our kids before they get to school. And frankly, the investment or the taking the time to hone the message and work with others to get that message out there in terms of, why it's important. And then, of course, your work on aligning goals, metrics, and systems really to support all early learners and their families. I'm going to turn to you now, Aruna. So you're doing the change management and leading this work on the ground. Yeah, closest to the kids, right? And it's and you're in one of Florida's most diverse communities. You've really had a front row seat to how state policy plays out in your classrooms, among students, among educators, among directors of programs, and also across your community. So tell us from your perspective, what sets Florida apart from other states, and how does that uniqueness support programs like yours that are focused on early learning and kindergarten readiness?
Sure. So thank you, Sunil. Listen, you've got some powerhouses here. Makayla tells you what happens if you don't think about early learning, right? And certainly Chancellor Miller tells you about her focus on early learning. And, we're so happy to have her as a convert because she is the best megaphone you can have in Florida. So definitely. But Florida has really set itself apart in how we tackle early learning. We didn't just go ahead and pick a strategy and run with it, right? We really sat down, looked at what we really wanted, and we are looking at blending smart policies, looking at innovation, and targeting funding to really build that robust system of early learning. And so policies create a framework, but they're flexible, right? Because we have to have enough that we can allow for local innovation. And I believe it was back in about 2014 when that really started. We started with the performance funding pilot. Some of you may remember that, where we just had local leaders who sat around the table and tried to figure out what this quality early learning system could look like or should look like. And so year after year, after 2014, we iterated. And it wasn't just about agreeing on everything, because certainly we didn't do that, but on what worked for children, and then having the flexibility to differentiate on top of it, right? Really what we're looking at is anchoring early learning as a building block for future success, and assuring that there was a robust accountability standard to influence readiness. Chancellor Miller talks a lot about the work in Florida, but huge kudos to Chancellor Miller for really looking at that accountability piece and recognizing that early learning didn't stand a chance unless we had something to measure, right? If you didn't have something to measure, there was nowhere to go with that. So people like Chancellor Miller and Aaron Smeltzer at the Children's Forum, and Representative Dana Trabolsky, Senator Grawl, all of those people were pioneers in the foundation of what Florida has become for early learning, which, I might be biased, but I think the #1 in the nation, right? I will tell you the coalition is the #1 in the state, but in the nation, Florida is definitely there. So let's talk a little bit about what that might look like for, on the local level. In Palm Beach County specifically, we're really looking at an approach where we're leveraging Florida's framework, right, to address local needs, because we're delivering services to about 40,000 children in Palm Beach County, at or below that 150% federal poverty line. And, we have approximately, I think the last count I had was about 700 childcare provider sites. And those provider sites run the gamut, right? We're looking at for-profit, nonprofit childcare sites. We're looking at school district sites, Head Start, Early Head Start, faith-based, you name it, we have it. So, you can see from that it becomes kind of a sticky wicket to figure out how to move all people in the direction we're moving, right? So what was the problem we were really trying to solve in Palm Beach? The real problem for us was that we were stuck. I've been here for about 20 years, and we were stuck at that 50% readiness rate for children entering that kindergarten space. And boy, oh boy, was that stubborn. It would not move. No matter what we did, it just stuck there and stayed there. And then the pandemic rolled around, and it didn't go lower, but we saw that it could have. And we knew that we needed to have like an intervention point where we can really do something different. And I think it was at that point that we were making a decision on where were we going. And our CEO, Warren Eldridge, came up with my Math and My Reading Academy for Age of Learning. All right, so full disclosure, this is where I hope he's not on, but full disclosure, you know, he told us about this, and for me, it was a no. It was like a really hard no, because, you know, as an early childhood advocate, the last thing I wanted was put more screen time in front of children, right? I just didn't see how that was necessary or relevant to the work we were doing. But listen, the evidence became impossible to ignore, right? We started looking at what we were doing. We started looking at what was happening, and it really changed my perspective on seeing how quickly children could close learning gaps. And that's really what we're here for. So no matter what I might have thought as an early learning advocate, the proof was in the pudding, right? We had to do that. And we're not talking here about passive screen time. We're not talking about someone watching TV or a YouTube channel. It's engaging, it's adaptive learning that really are meeting children where they're at and building critical literacy skills. So as we started doing this, we were looking at age of learning and trying to figure out what to do. We initially started with 250 children, a pretty small pilot. Like I said, I wasn't really, you know, completely hooked on this, but we were going to try to figure out what we were going to do with it. I did have a CEO in my ear, so that, you know, that happens too. And we started with the 250 children in our lowest areas where we were seeing lowest readiness. They were also predominantly Spanish-speaking children. But we were already 5 months into the VPK program. So we weren't sure what to do there, but honestly, we started and we said, well, let's get there, and no high expectations, just let's get there. We measured success specifically looking at that STAR benchmark that Carrie talked about. So when we started the assessment, now, like I said, I was here 20 years and I thought I was doing really great work. And then I did an assessment with students on this age of learning, and lo and behold, in literacy, they only knew between 5 and 10 skills of the 145 they needed to know to get to kindergarten. 5 months left in a VPK program. And it was really a staggering moment. It was a moment that really, whether this thing worked or not, what choice did we have at that point, right? So we implemented it. It got, you know, we put it in there, still kind of swallowing really hard about this. And about a month later, I finally said, well, I'm ready and I'm brave enough to look and see what's happening. And a month later, those scores tripled. In some cases, doubled, but most cases tripled. And that skill acquisition was just soaring. And so as we were looking at that, right, we recognized that by the end of the year, when we got to the end of the year, it had narrowed the gap by 81%. And that's just not me talking or the, you know, the computer talking, as I would usually say. It's really about when we said that 81%, it was validated by a third-party research group. And as though that was not enough, we also brought in University of Florida to say, is this really true? Because it was just such a staggering change that we wanted to see what happened. And they validated that as well, that it was working. So seeing these results, no-brainer for us. Fast forward 2 years, and we have a new study with 2,000 children in, 8,000 children using the program, and the results continue to be impressive, right? The students using My Reading Academy showed 144-point growth compared to the 99 points in our control group. And that's a 45% achievement, greater achievement. So significant stuff, right? It's not something that we were used to seeing, and certainly not that quickly, right? By spring of 2024, we were significantly ahead in kindergarten readiness from where we were before. And for the students using it compared to their peers, it was really something significant. I should say at this point is that it wasn't a mandatory program for our childcare sites, right? It was offered as an access point, and it was offered for our VPK program specifically. But we now see the majority of our childcare sites using it because, you know, the data is just very self-evident. So in addition to using these accountability measures, children who use the program, right, gained approximately 16 points of growth per month. Carrie talked about that 30% space. And this is what we were talking about. 16 points of growth per month compared to the control group who only gained 11.9 points per month. So right then and there, we saw that readiness was working for us, right? And it was definitely something we wanted to know more about. and we wanted to continue doing. So that's what happened with kids, right? And that's the most important thing. But significant to that, and we know that the relationship between teachers and students and teachers and parents is an important one if we're going to get anywhere. And so we started surveying parents and teachers and asking them, well, what do you think, right? What do you think about this? You're using it, what do you think? Overwhelmingly, our teachers told us not only did they want it in the classroom, but it was also giving them confidence in the way they were teaching and confidence in the way they could instruct. Because for the first time, they were able to figure out not just what was happening in a group setting, but what was happening individually for that child and then collectively for that classroom. When you know that, you're able to scaffold your learning outside of that gameplay, so to speak. And so when you have information of what children are learning, what they mastered, what they're in the middle of learning, and what they're yet to learn, you can also do something fantastic. And that fantastic thing is you can significantly impact how children play. Because play should be intentional. It's not just get out there and run around, right? It's an intentional space. So when you can do that, then you can start scaffolding everything else you're doing in that classroom that we know is so developmentally appropriate, right? On an anecdotal space, we also saw as children learned and as teachers understood how to kind of progress with their teaching, we're using the class assessment for 50% of the score. We're in year 3 of Age of Learning, and this is the first year that we have 0 of our sites on a quality improvement plan. Our class scores are going up, our instructional support is going up, and we're starting to see that our teachers really understand classroom organization, they understand management of those children's emotion, and most certainly are starting to show great strides in getting that intentional learning piece. So in addition to all of that, we're able to send all that information home, right? So parents can do something at home as well. And we all know parents are their child's first teacher. And so we really want to engage them in getting quality information so that they can really provide that to their families. So that's a long, drawn out way of saying, I would say Florida approach works, right? Because it combines that universal access with local flexibility and allows communities like ours to really implement evidence-based programs that meet specific needs while still maintaining those standards for kindergarten readiness. Thank you so much.
That's fantastic, Aruna, and really appreciate the data and evidence-driven approach, and that you actually did say yes and didn't stick with the no that you started with. So otherwise we wouldn't be here. And I want to really thank you all for your insights, but it's not because they're more than just platitudes. You're providing real metrics and data that I think it's critical in terms of discussing policy and making a difference in terms of driving outcomes. And I think what is clear from this first questions I've asked is that Florida's approach to early learning has really been shaped by strong public-private alignment and partnerships, bold goals, and just a real deep commitment to understanding what data infrastructure is needed to make the real impact that we all desire in terms of increasing early literacy, early numeracy skills, and overall just having our kids ready for school. And so for my next question, what I'd like to do is shift to how does this work in Florida, or how can this work in Florida inform and inspire other states and communities to replicate what you've done and continue, which is all about continuous improvement, because we're not there yet. This is just a start. But how do you put that in place? So what I'm going to start with is a question to you, Aruna, and it'll be the same question to all 3 of you. So what advice can you provide policymakers who are looking to expand or strengthen early learning programs in their states and communities? Aruna, to you.
Yeah, so wow. Move to Florida, is that an option? You'll get Makayla, you'll get Carrie. I would say embrace innovation, right? Embrace innovation that is not just for the sake of innovating, but innovation that's rooted in evidence and research and demand accountability. That is something that, we praise what Chancellor Miller has done, really demand accountability. And when we first proposed integrating technology into our pre-K classrooms, we faced lots of resistance. Sorry, not resilience. That is definitely not what we faced. A lot of resistance, myself included. I talked about that. And I think that that's a natural space to be in. A lot of people were worried about the investment. It's an investment. A lot of people were worried about screen time, wondered if it would yield results. But here we are, right? And looking at numbers, they speak for themselves. 25% higher kindergarten rates, 45% more growth over the year. Those are staggering numbers. And they're just not just, I don't want you to walk away with that they're just statistics, right? It's not just statistics. It represents thousands of children, in our case, over 10,000 children entering kindergarten with stronger foundations. And I believe that the key was really balancing that innovation with accountability. And we didn't just implement technology and hope for the best, right? We measured consistently. We adjusted our approach. We kept our focus really firm on usage and outcomes. And for our educators, this approach has been transformative, right? You heard what I said about, what teachers think, and teachers tell us they feel empowered. The platform gives them insights they've never had before. And that's something that really empowers our early learning space and actually professionalizes that space. The more you understand about education and about teaching, the more you can offer things in the classroom and feel as though this is a job and a career, not just a space to babysit. And that's really important for us. We have a provider, and I'm going to call her out, and if she ever knows this, she'll probably strangle me. But Sequoia Osborne from Universal Learning Academy, she said to us the other day, and I'll read what she says, "For the first time, I feel like I have a window into each child's learning, not just for what I can see during group activities." That's really why we're doing this. This is exactly why we're doing this. And parents can see concrete progress, understand specific skills that their children are developing, and continue that literacy piece at home. So, for small businesses, and this is something that Makayla has done extraordinarily well. She's really talked about what early learning means to business, what's that pipeline, and why should businesses care. But when you bring it all the way down to a local perspective, and you're looking at the smallest part, right, the childcare owner itself, this product offered us an opportunity that, for providers who are operating on tight margins with limited resources, really an opportunity to have a kindergarten readiness product or program that really rivals larger institutions. We typically see this in private institutions and big schools, right? We don't see this in our childcare spaces. So my advice to policymakers is straightforward, pretty much. Be bold about innovation, but equally bold about measuring results. Allocating funds, not just for programs, but for proper evaluation. I think that's really important. The other thing I would say is, kind of get laser focused on evidence-based approaches. Most importantly, I guess, is be prepared to champion change. It's going to be hard and it's going to be difficult, but champion change. I'm a social worker at heart. And the first thing I tell clients when I'm talking to them about therapy is that being uncomfortable means something good's happening. You're changing. Because if we felt comfortable, nothing would be happening, right? So early learning isn't just another policy area. I really want people to know that. It's a foundation that makes all educational investments more effective. Makayla talks about that. And we know that. So here in Palm Beach, we would say to you, we have the right approach with the right combination of technology and assessments and programs for children, coaching, professional development. All of those things significantly improve the foundation for children.
Thank you, Aruna. Let me turn the question now Makayla. Same question. So what advice do you have for policymakers?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing I would say is, this work has taken a number of years. The work that Chancellor Miller is referring to, and the accountability of EPK, and the way that class assessments are done, and the opportunity for Age of Learning and all of the innovation to happen at the Early Learning Coalition level in Palm Beach did not happen overnight, right? None of this work happened overnight, and that incremental change is okay. That we do not have to boil the ocean, that we can have a series of policy packages over a number of years that will still support the overall system, but will change things in the right direction. As you've kind of heard, there are a number of people I feel like we still have to convert in many states. Florida, we feel like we're doing a great job through all of the different initiatives that are aligned at reaching into communities and getting people to understand the business and the economic case, as well as the educational and the moral imperative for this work. But there are a lot more folks that we have to convert to help them understand why the greatest ROI, why early learning really is that foundation of the house we're trying to build, the economy we're trying to build, the businesses we're trying to build. And that's not to say that the work isn't urgent, right? The work is very urgent. We have those 2030 goals. It's 2025. We've got to be drastically different and better for the babies that are being born this year if we want to reach 100% kindergarten readiness, and we're currently at 51, right? So incremental change is good, but continue to keep the urgency front and center. Obviously, you've heard a lot about the data, lots of statistics, lots of numbers being thrown at you. Yes, we would always argue keeping data at the center, knowing where we're at, knowing where we're going. And what I believe and what I feel like I can't leave here without saying is, as the daughter of two public school educators in the state, I feel like it's really important to understand the realities facing our early learning providers, our classrooms. And so when we're making policy change and we're thinking about how can we improve the system, how do we capture that feedback, and how do we make sure that whenever we're doing things that those unintended consequences, if we never ask the question to the people in the field, the people like Aruna, that may happen, and not take us closer to our goal, but actually take us maybe further away or sidestep us when we thought maybe that it would actually drive progress, and then be upset that it did not. So those would really be my big things, my big takeaways for you guys. But just keep staying the course, and feel free to reach out to us and talk a little bit about how we sort of took that strategic approach as a state, much of which is done before I got here. But, quality, of course, what's the professional development? How are we going to hold people accountable? All of the things. And I'm sure Chancellor Miller will have more to say about that. So.
Yeah, I love the idea that not just the idea, but the mission and the statement that it is a moral imperative, and one that we all need to embrace, because it does make such a difference. So over to you, Chancellor Miller. Let's hear your thoughts on how you can advise your advice to other policymakers and people that are executing this on the ground across the country.
Yeah, so I'm going to take a slightly different lens in respect to being champions and how policy does get enacted, because that's one thing in the state of Florida that we have. And as Makayla already alluded to, it's not the folks you see here on this call, right? And so I think it's important that you grow your own within your state. We have a number of champions in the state of Florida in our legislative body that have rose up to form policy to implement a number of the initiatives you'll hear, potentially a little bit, some more here in a bit, in respect to where we've come. This is not the birth of Carrie. This is not Makayla's birth, right? This is not Aruna's. There's a number of champions in the state of Florida for early learning, but it did take, right, folks coming together, right, and educating those champions so they could pass effective policy to make improvements in our space, right? And so I think it does, in the end, does take a village, right? So I think my angle would be more so how to do that, right? How do you grow champions within the legislature, right, for early learning? And we have unbelievable partners in the state of Florida that I've heavily relied on, right, as building good partnerships and relationships with a number of prominent early learning organizations in the state of Florida. There's a number of them. We have some joining us today, right? We have the Children's Forum. We also have our Association of Early Learning Coalitions, right? So we have our 30 early learning coalitions across the state. We have an association that is the body that is their voice, right? That helps advocate and raise awareness of the importance of early learning. I was just with state college professors, right? And our community colleges that we now in state of Florida have state colleges. Was just with them this morning, right? And so really building relationships and networking and having one voice, right, to identify the need, and then doing a needs assessment, if you will, and the legislative staff doing the same in their area to identify, well, what are we trying to overcome, right? And then supporting that. So again, for me, it's knowing your landscape, which I had to learn along the way, that we have unbelievable early learning organizations that are doing fantastic work, leverage them, right, and learn from them. We have our early learning coalitions across the state that are the ground running, doing the work and see it every single day, right? So listening to the needs and respect to the work so we can address those needs and continue to have a laser-like focus on improving kindergarten readiness. We have school districts that provide our VPK program, right? And being in front of them and having the message of, I really believe we're doing a disservice if our public school system is not providing VPK. I also think if our private sector doesn't offer VPK, we're doing a disservice to the families in the state of Florida because it's a free opportunity. And if they participate in VPK, we know they're more likely to enter kindergarten ready for school, right? And so options for families matter, right? But also playing with the right folks and leveraging the brilliance out in front of you to partner with to help our champions fight for good policy in our early learning space is critically important. And we have, I mean, as you shared, like the Florida Chamber, right? You would be like, interesting, but perfect advocate in person to raise awareness of the importance of the space, right? And again, we have a number of organizations and early learning professionals in the state that we really have embraced each other, come together. We really work hard to have a consistent message and say it over and over again. And then also make sure you have identified champions within the legislative body to support good policy making, to continue to push you forward in preparing kids to enter kindergarten ready for school, which means you got to prepare families too, right? It's both. So that would be the angle, and I would take options for expansion, right? Options, give options, all the options possible, private, faith-based, schools, family home childcare, right? I mean, all the options so families can make informed decisions in regards to what early learning program best meets their needs. Access, making sure there's access, which is challenging right now in our time of childcare, recognizing it's very expensive. And in the state of Florida, we have a minimum wage that's about to hit $15 an hour, and a lot of our families that could very much benefit from our school readiness program, our financial assistance program, don't qualify, right, for those programs. So access to those programs matter as well. And then the public school component for me is near and dear because we did a study last year and found that of families that weren't participating in VPK, it was because there wasn't a public school option. So when we talk about expansion, right, we want to expand it everywhere. VPK, if they participate in VPK, they're more likely to enter kindergarten ready for school. Private, public, faith-based, family home childcare, all of them, right? All of them. But to me, our public school system has an opportunity, right? If that is a need, and we see that a need as families, that families want to have that option, that's why they chose not to participate. They have an option to expand VPK because they also have options of Title I dollars, right? That helps with wraparound services and could potentially provide an entire free day for our VPK children. And so again, those are some ways in which I would encourage lawmakers to consider for expansion purposes is just, taking advantage, providing options and expanding in the places we already got, right? We have a lot of places. Being at capacity in these places is another thing. And then strengthening, which I think, again, we have a lot of policies that have been enacted, again, way before my time, that we've just had the opportunity to plan and effectively implement, right? We were able to take that policy and then turn that policy into something that is implementable. And we'll see how this goes, the 24-25 program year. But for strengthening, right, continuing to measure, right, what gets measured gets done. Preparing our workforce, right, ensuring they have the confidence, so they have the training and the necessary skills to feel confident in sitting in front of a child every single day, that they feel confident they can meet the needs of that individual child, recognizing we have children with a whole, a slew of different needs, right, which requires a lot of professional learning. So prepared workforce, I think, is key when we're talking about strengthening. And then, of course, our accountability system and our program assessment, ensuring quality and continuing to measure that and support, not just measure it and say, here are the results, but measure it, use that information to inform and improve our quality and our practices within our early childhood setting. So.
Thank you, Chancellor Miller. And I hope there's a takeaway on the grow your own champions and expand. I do feel like my experience in Florida, knowing Molly, knowing Jess and the work of AELC, knowing what Erin Smeltzer and her team do at Children's Forum. It's just and you have so many more organizations like Children's Movement, where Madeline and her team are moving the message everywhere. And so it's really refreshing to hear like everybody singing from the same hymn book on the benefits of investing in early childhood. And to that end, and Aruna, there's a little bit of a follow-up question for you. I know that a lot of what we've just talked about in those messages, though they are permeating into the communities, your recent work has been, talking to your board about it, and then having your board advocate for early learning and what your organization does in your business community locally in Palm Beach, and also talking to your local chamber. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, our board has been instrumental in really moving a lot of this work. And, our chair, Howard Bernstein, consistently talks about, that space where we're talking about early learning everywhere. It's in every corner and everything that you do. And so a lot of our work has been, I've been spending a lot of time going to all of the different chambers and really talking about, that public-private partnership, really talking about what is their space and how can we make gains, because we know a lot of work happening in communities happen in their chamber or happens in their county meetings or their council meetings. And so we want to be able to make sure that we're going into those spaces and we're talking about what it is we are doing locally, but also collectively in Florida. What is this movement that we are moving towards? Both Carrie and Makayla talked a lot about, affordability and accessibility. And so that's something that critically is a critical component that we have to go out there and talk about. In our community, we first need to understand those two things, because each community looks so much different when we're talking about affordability and accessibility. And so going out into the community and really trying to figure out, what does that define for everybody out there? What are the needs and where are we falling short? Because that's equally as important. As we're talking about, when we're going back to legislation and we're talking, Warren is going out and talking about what's next. We want to make sure we're arming him with the right decisions and the right information so that our legislators can make the right decisions, because our decisions are made on what we are telling them, right? And unless we're giving appropriate information, those decision-making falls short. And so it's really important that we're talking about that. Carrie talked about the $15 an hour. We're all concerned about that at this point, because the entry point to come into to getting subsidized childcare, that's going to be highly effective. There's new legislation coming out talking about how we will extend that back end, right? And so that's really exciting, right? Because children can stay longer with us. And we know the longer they stay, the better off they are in early learning. And so that's really exciting. But now we have to figure out, what are we doing with the front end, right? Because if they can't get in, they can't stay longer. And so really time to start looking at that front end as well, to figure out how we can get that full trajectory for the students we're serving.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Carrie, I know your deep love and advocacy for early literacy, and as a part of that, as you talk about the challenges with attracting qualified educators in to that understand the science of reading and can effectively teach it and understand the theory. And I know Florida has done some unique things with micro credentials and such that I think I'd love to get your perspective on what you're doing and how that's been effective.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Neil shared, there has been a major emphasis and focus on emergent literacy, right? Language and literacy in our early learning space and opportunities for a number of K-5 policies that started in K-5 that have been expanded to our VPK children in the state of Florida. And for me, that alone with policies that are being enacted, right, by the legislature for expansion, for inclusion of our VPK kids sends a pretty strong message in itself, and that, we do have champions. They are listening and they're recognizing starting earlier is essential. And so a couple of those programs, one being, as Sunil alluded to, is the Emergent Literacy Micro-Credential. There was the development of Emergent Literacy Micro-Credential, Elementary Micro-Credential, as well as a Secondary Literacy Micro-Credential. The Emergent Literacy Micro-Credential is actually available to any child care personnel in the state of Florida that wants to participate in the Emergent Literacy Micro-Credential. It's 60 hours, but it's a credential, so a micro credential, so it's competency based. But if you complete that credential, you also receive funding too. You get a little stipend, if you will, for completion. So not only are we building, our early learning educators and our professionals in the state's knowledge of how best to support emergent literacy and our language and literacy standards in the state of Florida within their classroom, giving them confidence to do that. But they also, aren't compensated very well, right? So it's an opportunity to get a stipend too. So last year was $2,000 if they completed the emergent literacy micro-credential under ARPA dollars. No longer do we have, and this year it's $1,000 for completion of emergent literacy micro-credential. So that's one opportunity for our early learning professionals to really help, again, have training and build their confidence to provide effective supports in language and literacy, our language and literacy standards. We also, policy was passed that requires our VPK lead instructors, so those that are the main instructors within their VPK classroom, to have 15 hours worth of emergent literacy training. So the micro-credential is a great fit for that. That's one option they can use to do that. But there are a number of other options out there, professional learning wise, for our VPK lead instructors to earn and receive that training. So there's a requirement for 50 hours of emergent literacy training for them to be a VPK lead instructor. Most recently, we worked actually on what we call curriculum frameworks, which are the frameworks that are utilized by our state colleges, as well as a certificate program separate of our state college AS degree in early childhood education, to ensure that those curriculum frameworks have all the literacy content in them. So when those teacher candidates exit those programs, they will have that 15-hour requirement. So that was recent work that's done. It just passed yesterday at the state board. So come 25-26, teacher candidates that start their AS degree or the certificate program that's separate in the state of Florida, ECPC is what it's referenced. If they start in fall, those candidates exiting those programs will have met that training requirement. So excited about that partnership and that work as well. Again, really trying to work on not only preparing our workforce, but also having a workforce, right? Because that's twofold right now. We want to have one and we want them to be prepared too, right? So we're kind of doing the balancing act in respect to that. So those are some two major ones. I'm going to share two others quickly. specifically for reading, we have New World's Reading Initiative that was established a few years ago. Again, for K-5, they expanded to VPK. It's basically a free book distribution initiative, really building extending literacy opportunities in the home, so building a home library of books for children. It was expanded to allow VPK children to participate in that, eligible VPK children. And then most recently, a New World Scholarship account, which again started in K-5, gives scholarships to families that have children that may have difficulties in math or reading, that they can use that scholarship as they see fit with some parameters, right? Instructional materials, they can do before school, after school tutoring, etc. So giving parents an option with a scholarship to use that and above and beyond the VPK program that their child's participating in to get additional support and services outside of your typical walls, right? So that's another opportunity that was expanded to our VPK population, which we're really excited about, to share a few of the literacy efforts in which we've had take place over the course of the past 3 years, I'd say.
Thank you, Chancellor Miller. I see a question related to the emergent literacy micro-credential. Can you provide the curriculum, and is there a practice included?
So I don't have the answer to that, and honestly, I'd have to check with UF Lassinger Center. Clearly, priority is for Florida population, right? It's funded for Florida educators, etc. But I do think UF Lassinger Center does provide those options outside of the state as well. So something worth checking, like with, again, UF Lassinger Center would be your contact for that, to find out the opportunities that you may be able to participate in said micro-credentials. So that was what I would recommend, is reaching out to UF Lassinger Center in respect to potential opportunities in that. Clearly our focus and the funding component of that is definitely for Florida educators, and actually those that could be in Georgia, but they're working in Florida, right? They'd have to be here, right? And supporting them and their work and building their knowledge and skill set. But there could be opportunities for you all in respect to that. Contact UF Lassinger Center if you want to inquire a little bit more about said opportunities.
And building on what you had said, Chancellor Miller, I want to ask, I know, Aruna, you and I discussed and you had implemented some additional training locally around the science of reading. Tell us about that and why you felt like that was important within your own context.
Yeah, I think, innovation and having technology is just a start, right? We were able to measure and we were able to understand where the gaps were. And so really critically important for us was understanding how to fill those gaps, so that when you're looking at that data on what children know, what they're mastering, and what they need to move forward in, you know what to do as a result of that. So it's having the information is one thing, being able to know what to do with the information is a totally different game. So making sure that those things were in place. And we found that once we started Age of Learning, the questions started, because then instructors really started to realize what they didn't know, or what maybe they were casting a big net in and hoping to catch all their fish at one time. And so we did, as Chancellor Miller talked about, the literacy credential, immediately came out with the literacy credential, and which was fantastic. Was prior to us implementing Age of Learning, no one really took it, because it's a really protracted, long period of time that you're doing it. And a lot of teachers were like, I don't have the time for that. But when they started realizing what they didn't know and how much they needed to know, we had 90 instructors in one fell swoop. And so we had to open up all of these training areas in order to have all of that happen. And so we've seen great potential with that. In addition, we do a lot of training around like micro understandings, right? So taking something small and really working through how that happens in a curriculum and how it happens in a classroom, like making sure that we're connecting your learning to your teaching and constantly moving it from theory to practice and theory to practice, because that's the big part and the sticky part that we want to happen, right? We know that, for instance, we talked about the class assessment. We also know that there's the class-based coaching. Using that alongside class really propelled our scores as well. And making sure that in between, there was a lot of coaching elements. So we have this magic formula that I'm not sure that I should disclose, because it could be that, you know, people may be rivaling us, but it is a magic formula of the amount of coaching we're doing with the CGC training alongside the class assessment that's really starting to look like magic, right? And then you go into the VPK classroom and you layer on that the fact that we understand how children are learning, what they're learning, and what's coming next. That just like it's a sweet spot for us. So we really have seen really good implementation around that.
You know, a follow-up on Aruna, I had the pleasure of meeting Miss Osborne Sequoia and visiting her center in December. And yes, they were using our programs when I walked in that classroom. But what really struck me is what loving relationships that had been established in that center. And you and I are both fans of Isabel Howe's book, Love to Learn, and it talks a lot about relationship quotients and how do you do that. Tell us how technology and relationships coexist in centers like the one that Miss Osborne manages.
Yeah. So yeah, you know, it's so amazing. Early learning has come so far that the MBA in the room is talking about relationship building and literacy. So, I mean, that just, I mean, if that doesn't underscore what we're doing and how important it is, I don't know what does. But, you know, one of the things that I would say as a social worker and having been with kids pretty much all my life, is that your brain is wired to learn faster if you have safe, loving relationships. And so as those relationships, and I think that's probably one of the things Chancellor Miller looked at when she was thinking about class and 50% class, right? Because that relationship and that interaction between the teacher and child propels learning. But having said that, if they don't know what they're interacting around, then the interaction falls short, right? That whole part about I talk, you talk, I talk, you talk, that whole exchange of information between a teacher and a child has to be intentional and purposeful. And so when you layer technology over that and they're starting to understand what is it that I'm going to talk to you about and what is it you're going to talk to me about, then it becomes purposeful and intentional. And what you see is, you know, those brain synapses start going, and before you know it, learning becomes lifelong, because now they're understanding that love for learning. Learning isn't something where you sit there and you just memorize or you get dittos and everybody tells you the apple is red, so I color it red. And if you have opportunities to understand.
Thank you, Aruna. Thank you, Aruna. I
You're welcome.
noticed we only have a couple minutes, and I know
no, I can talk for hours.
Yeah, like and I appreciate your calling out that an MBA knows what serve and return is, and that is not just something you do at the country club. So appreciate that. Final thoughts from Makayla and Carrie, and then we turn it over to Angela for to wrap us up.
Yeah, sure. So I guess just again from the Florida Chamber Foundation lens, and you know, if you're not already engaging your business community, definitely reach out to your state chamber. I know we have a group of us who are connected at a national level where these conversations are going on, believe it or not, all the time. What are you doing in early learning? How are you supporting the system? What are you doing about reading scores? And I think this conversation is seeing a lot of converts, and I think the momentum is growing from the business community. So if you're not already engaged with them and they don't already have some sort of initiative aligned with the workforce development, how that starts really with early learning, then, you know, please have them reach out to us and we'll be happy to share our ways.
Chancellor Miller?
So my only, I would say, closing remark, which I think I've probably made loud and clear, is networking and building relationships matter, right? And knowing your players in your field and uniting with one strong message and having salient points on why it's important, and never stop saying those salient points. As a lot of people folks, well, we already talked about that. Well, we only touch so many stakeholders across the state, right? And so it's important, I think, again, to just have one united front, come up with your salient points of why early learning matters and why kindergarten readiness matters, because it's a huge predictor of whether a kiddo's going to read by the 3rd grade, and that's a huge predictor of whether kids are going to graduate high school. And say it over and over again like a broken record. It goes a long way, but players matter, and I can't say enough. We have such strong organizations in the state of Florida, and all very passionate about what they do. And when coming together with that united front, we're so very powerful, right? So very powerful, and find those champions in the legislature, and they become part of that unit, right? They are part of that unit. They live it and breathe it. They know it. They own it. And so we've had great success with that. And again, started way before my time. I just had the pleasure of coming into this at a great time, meeting a number of great folks, and opportunity to implement some of the policies that have been created over the course of the past 3 years. So super excited about that opportunity. And just want to say thanks to everybody that's joined this call. We see a number of states. I've got them all written down, which is super exciting, nationwide. So it's great to have everybody. If anybody has any questions, concerns, or wants to bend my ear, I'm open, always, in respect to any type of policy around, especially accountability and ensuring we're preparing our kids for kindergarten. So.
Thank you three for sharing. Thanks the Hunt Institute for again giving us this opportunity to have this conversation and sharing what I feel like is a real formula for success for not only individual states but the nation. So over to you, Angela, for the wrap up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Really, it makes my day when I can have sessions like this and just hear from experts across the country that are as passionate about early childhood as I am. And I really love the last few messages that we're leaving with from Aruna about the relationship, the importance of that beginning brain development. We call it care and learning, because if there's not care, then there can't be the learning. So it's really important to have both of those components, and then appreciate the messaging from Chancellor Miller. Just get those talking points, that elevator speech, as the advocates call it, and drive those points home, because it's so important for all of us, as Makayla said, for our economy, for our really future of our society. And it's not really an overstatement. With the workforce of today and the workforce of tomorrow is what early childhood supports. So thank you all. Thanks, Sunil, for bringing this to our attention. And again, for Age of Learning supporting the Hunt Institute. We really appreciate that partnership as well. Appreciate everyone attending. I know folks are dropping off as we turn the quarter hour here, but I do want to share one more link in the chat for our next Early Efforts webinar from the Hunt Institute. You can find that registration here. As I said, this recording will be up on the Hunt Institute's YouTube page probably early next week. I will also be sharing it via email with everyone who registered, along with all the great links and information. I don't know if y'all are able to click on all the links that were shared in the chat. There's a lot of great information out there, and we'll make sure that information is shared with the video and again via email. So with that, I will say thanks again and have a great rest of your day, everyone. Take good care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sunil.